Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Thursday afternoon, and we are hanging out with the one and only Larry Johnson. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Larry Johnson. We got one or two things going on this week, but the first thing I want to tell you, and this is important, and it's a website that I never miss, Sonar 21. That's Larry's website, as you can see, all kind of very important articles there. He's got an article on Trump's meeting with Ramaphosa. We've got stuff about what's happening with the negotiations and a Putin phone call about the Germans just acting like complete crazy people again. Here's an interesting, the Ukraine war validates the Second Amendment, and on and on. So there's lots of stuff. What is the Third Amendment? And the Third Amendment was like, military troops shall take quarter in no citizen's home during a time of military and all that stuff. So that was right there too. But at any rate, Sonar 21 is Larry's website, and all the stuff you need, and you got to keep up with the good articles. And of course, the big part there, support us, right? You can do PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, or buy me a coffee. And always remember, I always have my guests on, but always remember, the people that are doing this stuff, alternative media, this comes out of our own pockets. That Larry's got to pay for that. We do good work and people help us out, but we got to pay for that stuff. And sometimes you make a few pennies, and a lot of times you lose a whole lot of pennies, but we do it because we believe in it. So if you can help Larry, if you can help keep his work going, sonar21.com. And if you can possibly donate to the cause, it will be greatly appreciated. Let's start here, Larry. I want to get your thoughts on it. Various people talked about it, and we're starting to get some feedback about what might have been said between Trump and the Europeans. The Trump-Putin phone call. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Donald Trump was being baited into a trap by the Europeans. They wanted him to present Putin with basically a black and white demand, which is either accept an immediate unconditional ceasefire, freeze in place, or else bone-crushing sanctions will be imposed upon you. And Trump may have initially signaled to the Europeans that he's willing to do that, but when he got into the conversation with Putin, he didn't. And Putin said, "Look, we're willing to talk to the Ukrainians and continue negotiations, but we're not going to stop fighting until we've got some very firm principles agreed upon." And most important of these is that all Ukrainian forces have to be out of Russian territory, period. That's non-negotiable. So Trump basically acceded to that. Putin promised, okay, yeah, we'll talk again with the Ukrainians, but those talks are going to produce nothing. There is not going to be a negotiated settlement, and so the only question will remain: will Trump impose sanctions? And I actually think he will, not because he wants to, but because the Senate and House of Representatives will force his hand. You've already got Lindsey Graham, who, in my view, is one of the most corrupt senators up there. I've been told that he's personally profiting off of all this aid money that's being sent to Ukraine, but he's getting kickbacks. And I understand that a very prominent U.S. attorney is looking into that. And we may find some news on that in the coming days. But he has proposed a resolution to impose bone-crushing sanctions, and he's got 79 other senators on board. So we could very well be in a situation where the House and Senate would pass such legislation, and Trump would then be faced with either vetoing it and risking the wrath and risking them saying, hey, if you're not going to support us on this, we're not going to support you on your
Yeah,
big,
whatever. Yeah.
beautiful budget bill. So Trump, despite his, I'll call it, good intentions to try to come to an end of this conflict with Ukraine and Russia, still continues to enable it. I mean, he's still allowing weapons to flow, still allowing intelligence to flow, still allowing U.S. Advisors and intelligence operatives to act in the country. He could put it into that today, but he won't.
Well, Larry, it gets back to what we've discussed, and that is, look, the Russians lay out there. In fact, in December of 2021, the Russians laid out a list of things they wanted to talk about. They've always wanted to negotiate, right? If we're honest about the hell out of Ukraine, he would like to negotiate. If he could get out, we could talk about a lot of things we could criticize Donald Trump about. He wants to get the hell out of Ukraine. He doesn't want anything to do with that. But his battle the issue is internally. NATO is in complete flux. You got these European lunatics that are, I don't know, they're apparently cocaine fueled frenzy.
Yeah.
God only knows what they're up to. But you got these people who have put their whole career and everything into Russia's the bad guy, and we got to keep it going. Then you got these Lindsey Grahams who, he might as well be Tony Blinken. You got these people here, and really Trump has no fight with the Russians. This is an internal war going on, really, inside of NATO, the US, etc. There's an internal war, an internal struggle of people who want the hell out of Ukraine and people who don't want to leave no matter what, want to hold on at all costs. And I think part of it is this: they stuck their neck so far out on Ukraine that if this thing falls apart, God only knows what could happen to them and what could come out that they have done. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I want to go back and sort of untangle or disentangle how this how we got ourselves into this current situation, because let's call it the NATO project with Ukraine has been underway, as I think we discussed previously, since at least 1995. And I would argue that since 1997, Ukraine has been a de facto member of NATO. Now, you got to step back and then say, okay, why was the United States, along with the rest of Europe, so keen on bringing Ukraine into NATO? Well, the ostensible reason that was offered in terms of public comments was, oh, so Russia doesn't expand its empire and attack all of Europe. Well, the historical record is such: Russia did not, quote, attack Europe. Russia was attacked when it was a part of the Soviet Union from the West, and at the end of World War II, decided that it was going to have buffer states to protect itself, and it took control of those states. Now, I'm not arguing and saying, oh, that was the right thing to do. I'm just simply saying that's why they did it. They didn't do it because they were on some ideological quest to impose global communism on everybody. No, it was to provide a buffer. And we have some evidence of that by the fact that once they got agreement from Austria, even though the Soviet troops occupied Austria up until like 1954, 55, once Austria said, hey, we're going to be neutral, we're going to stay out of NATO, we're not going to get involved with any of this mess, Russia said, okay, cool. And they pulled out. So NATO was hell-bent on adding countries that were, seen by Russia as potential platforms of threat. And then NATO introduced weapon systems, particularly into Poland and Romania over the last 3 or 4 years, that are potential first strike weapons against Russia. So naturally, from Russia's standpoint, defeating Ukraine ain't the primary objective. It's defeating NATO. That's the root cause, getting rid of that root cause. And until people in the West begin to understand that, we're going to continue to underestimate and miss and not understand Russia.
Well, the other half of that is and what we're getting into is to reality, not this fake crap that NATO is just some benign defensive group there just for, goodness and puppies and kittens. The truth of it is NATO, they literally write documents that says we're going to use Ukraine to tear Russia to pieces. They have meetings. Let's take Russia into 3 parts, and then we can go after China using Russia. I mean, they're openly, it's like somebody standing outside saying, yes, we're going to kill Garland, and then we'll eat him. We'll take his home. We'll, steal his dog. We'll do all this. And then pretending that they're just coming over for a nice day to sit down and have a barbecue. So they literally come out and say all these terrible things that they want to do to Russia, and then try to pretend that NATO, no, we're just moving up to to protect ourselves from you. And that's the other part of it. The truth is that NATO is an aggressive military alliance that deliberately comes up to the border of Russia and openly argues that they want to take malicious acts against Russia, and then tries to claim that they're not going to do exactly what they've said that they plan to do.
Yeah, a lot of projection. Where I was in a a heated discussion the other night with a former State Department Foreign Service officer. This woman is a protege of Victoria Nuland, and I was I addressed the Manatee County Tea Party, a group of patriots who really question how much money the federal government should be spending. And I was laying out my view of what this entire war in Ukraine has been about, and pointing out the lies and misrepresentations of the West. And at the end of my presentation, she pops up with accusing me. She said, "You're just drinking Putin's Kool-Aid." Well, you know what? Nobody gets to say that to me, including her. And I blasted her and shut her down. But instead of addressing the actual arguments, the actual facts. So, what are some of those facts? Well, fact number one did the Russian military between 1991 and 2011, was it growing and expanding and creating a threat to neighbors? The answer is no. With respect to the war in Georgia, again, that's described as if Russia woke up one morning, nothing better to do, and say, God darn, I'm going to go attack me some Georgians, and launched a war for no good reason. Well, that's not the story. What actually happened, that most in the West don't understand or accept, is that when the Soviet Union broke apart, those 2 regions that are in northern part of Georgia, Ossetia and Abkhazia, they wanted to break away and declare their own independence, become their own independent areas. And so Russia ended up placing peacekeepers in there to sort of separate them from the Georgians and keep everything under control. And those Russian peacekeepers were attacked in early August of 2008, after Putin had issued stern warnings to NATO to stop trying to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO. And so that led to what was basically a 14-day war, very, very small casualties on both sides, but Russia beat the Georgian army and held them back. That didn't stop the West from its attempts to subvert Georgia and to run a color revolution there. So again, point after point after point that, I don't know if you've seen the latest. We now got a video from Ambassador Jim Jeffries. He used to be, as I recall, I think he was the head of the counterterrorism shop at one point, long after I left at State Department. And they got him on tape now describing how U.S. and British intelligence were cultivating and working with Mohammed al-Jalani while he was still part of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, al-Nusra. Now, the Russians have made repeated claims for 25 years that the United States has been actively involved in supporting, inciting, funding, training radical Islamists that they've used for their own political purposes. Well, you know what? That's now no longer a suspicion. We got actual testimony from the dude. So this is another one of the ways the United States has been meddling behind the scenes to try to destroy Russia. And what's finally happened is Putin said, we've had enough. This is the line, a red line. You cross it, we'll punch back. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, and what's interesting about it is, the NATO's plan, I mean, you talk about backfiring, because if you look at where we are right now, as opposed to where we were when this conflict started, they're moving, they're going to do all kinds of things. They're getting up in Russia's face. They're getting closer and closer. Now they're going to weaken Russia. But what ends up happening is they end up sending, and this is the big part, they end up loading all of their gear, their tanks, everything they had, they send to Ukraine, and Russia blew it to hell. And now they are in so much of a weaker position. They're threatening Russia. They're louder than ever. They're barking louder than ever. But the reality is, if Russia says, okay, that's it, we've had enough, let's fight, they don't have any teeth. NATO is stripped bare. As far as the only thing they could do is look at the United States, and the United States doesn't have the wherewithal, no country does, you can't go to the border of a superpower and fight that superpower, whether it's Russia or China or the United States. If you go to the border of a superpower and attack that superpower, you're going to lose that. And so now they're barking louder. We can't back down. We can't do that. And they have less ability to confront Russia militarily than they've probably ever had.
Yeah, so let's offer a thought experiment. Let's say the United States is wanting to we have our existing good relations with Mexico, and Mexico is in our economic orbit. But now Russia decides that it wants Mexico to come into its orbit through BRICS. And that Russia then begins sending in intelligence agents, begins pumping money into Mexico, organizing and funding groups that are protesting against being part of the U.S. sphere of influence. And it gets to the point that tens of thousands of Mexicans cluster into the central plaza of the capital city, La Capital, and begin protesting. And lo and behold, the head of the Russian legislature shows up and is encouraging those protesters. Yes, demand the ouster of this government for blocking your ability to become part of us. And the head of the foreign ministry of Russia, or let's say Maria Zakharova, shows up and she starts passing out cookies and treats. And then you get people that show up and they're actually brought in from the outside by Russia, and they start shooting people to make it look like it's the government of Mexico shooting, and then there's a coup. Now, how do you think we in the United States would react? We go, damn it, we're not going to stand for this. That's exactly what we did in Ukraine. Exactly. All I did was just change, the names of the countries. That's what we did. And we expect the Russians to be like Ned Beatty in Deliverance, bent over the log and taking it like a man. I mean, come on. It's outrageous. So that's what we're dealing with. That's what people need to understand.
Yeah, they really do. And we're at a point now, I've said for a while, Russia's position is this. Okay, you come to our border and you're going to start building bases and doing all this military stuff. You can do it, but you're going to have to fight to stay here. Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. You can do it, but you're going to have to fight to stay here. If you're willing to fight, we live here. The Russians have recently said, what do you want to do? A year, 2 years, 3 years? We fought a war 21 years. We live here. We ain't going nowhere. We're going to continue fighting. How long do you want to fight in Ukraine? We're going to fight until you lose. We will never lose because we live here. And that's what you end up when you go to Russia's border to fight them. You end up Russia saying, we live here. And that's what we keep, whether it was Vietnam, that's what we keep finding. We go halfway across the world to fight somebody else in their home. And sometimes it's a far weaker opponent. But they live there and they ain't never going away. And sooner or later, they'll get tired at home. You'll run out of money. You'll run out of weapons. The other things will come up. It ain't never coming up for them. And that's what these people don't get. And one other thing, and they could wait us out because you know what? Looking at Europe, The political climate is changing. The time is coming in Europe where the leaders that replace these people are going to be Euro skeptics, are going to be NATO skeptics. And the time, it may be a year, it may be 5 years, it may be 6 years, but there's a change coming in Europe politically. And the people that will be changed ain't going to want no parts of any of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Once the Europeans and other countries around the world wake up to the fact that, I hate to say it, but there's nothing good or well-intentioned about the United States and its dealings with other countries. It's always with an ulterior motive. It's sort of like that joke of these two Hollywood agents, and they watch this beautiful young woman walk by, a starlet. And the one agent says to the other, "Boy, I'd like to screw her." And the other agent says, "Out of what?" So that's the United States. Where motives are, we basically figured out different ways to rape different countries. And I apologize for the graphic term, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're forcing ourselves on these other countries, many times against their will or through blackmail or through pressure. And we actually saw a little demonstration of it yesterday. What I call it, I thought it was despicable and disgusting by Donald Trump with what he did with Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. It was just, and what's troubling about it is I'd say probably 90% of Americans are going, "Hell yeah, that's great. Oh, man, we showed him," without understanding just, how despicable that performance was.
Yeah, and it's performative, and we get this silly stuff. And here's what's bad. We got concrete problems. We got real problems in America that you can't perform your way out of. You know what I mean? We got serious economic problems that we can't blame China or Russia or anybody else for. It's our Congress and our government have made the decisions, and they're continuing to make the same old decisions that they're going to crash the dollar and every damn thing else. So we got real problems, and we don't need performances. But I did want to ask you something. What a term. You had an article, let me bring it up, at sonar21.com. That's where you can go to find this great article. And your article is, "It ain't just Russia, Putin. Key Russians are singing from the same sheet of music." And, that's something that a lot of people here don't get. You can go back to "Niet means Niet," the Burns memo, and Americans don't, a lot of Americans don't know that this was years ago, when then Ambassador Burns said he was in Russia, and everybody he talked to, the most pro-Western, pro-American person he found, they all said, "But Ukraine's a red line. No, no, no. You go into Ukraine, you're going to have a fight on your hands." And it's interesting because basically what I see in your article is a reflection of that, if you would. What do you have to say about that, Larry?
Well, yeah, the United States, in particular in its approach to foreign policy, it's very much like Hollywood. And I don't know if you've ever had to make a pitch on a project in Hollywood, but there's always, the first question is, who's the villain? Gotta have a villain. And it's always about one single character being the make or break difference. So we always like to conceptualize our relations with people, countries like Russia, in terms of just one person. It's Putin. Man, if only we got rid of Putin, everything would be okay. Just remember, if only we got rid of Fidel Castro, if only we got rid of Ngo Diem in Vietnam, if only we got rid of Manuel Noriega, if only we got rid of Muammar Gaddafi, if only we got rid of Bashar al-Assad. How about Saddam Hussein? Yep, let's take him. So it's always about just one, as if you change one character, man, you change the whole play. And that's not the case. And it's particularly laughable with respect to Russia, because this notion that, if you get rid of Putin, somehow you're going to get a more moderate, sensible, rational person. Boy, the people that are pushing that are, like I said, we need to have some drug testing done on them, because they're obviously using some highly highly toxic substances. Dmitry Medvedev, who has been prime minister, who has been president, who heads up basically sort of the National Security Council now for Putin, he's a hard ass, and he would have used nukes against us already. And frankly, he'd be justified because we are killing Russian civilians. We're facilitating the attacks. And up to this point, Putin has been willing to give us a pass. So what we see coming out of Medvedev, and I call it Istanbul 3. So in Istanbul 1, the negotiations that took place back in March, April of 2022, Putin was willing, and Lavrov, they agreed that basically Ukraine could keep Donetsk and Luhansk, but there would have to be firm guarantees that the Russian speakers would have special rights, special privileges, and that Ukraine was going to forego any further relations with NATO. And, Ukraine walked away from that. So that was Istanbul 1. Istanbul 2 dates June 14th, 2024. And June 14th, 2024 was when Vladimir Putin went to the Russian Foreign Ministry, gave a speech, laid out basically 5 conditions for Russia to enter into negotiations to end the war. And those conditions are that the 4 oblasts that Russia added to the Russian Federation in September of 2022 is now permanent members of Russia, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, that those have to be recognized and the Ukrainian troops are out of it. Ukraine has to forego any association with NATO. And there were some other conditions that he laid out with respect to denazification, et cetera. Well, the West has rejected that. Putin's asking too much. Well, here's Medvedev then the other day saying, you know what? If you refuse, this is your last chance for this deal on the table, because the next deal, we're taking it all. We're taking more. We're going to take all the territory east of the Dnieper River, and that's what I call Istanbul 3. That right now Ukraine has a chance to save itself in part. If not, this next phase, what according to Medvedev, will be the complete dismantling of Ukraine as a functioning state. And I absolutely believe not only are the Russians going to do that, but they're fully capable of doing that. And the West that keeps insisting, it's just a stalemate. Oh, like Marco the other day, Rubio. No, nobody can win this conflict militarily. Dude, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Well, the Ukrainians are going to wake up one day and find out. They're going to wake up one day and the Russians are going to put the hammer down on them. And then the Macrons and the Starmers of the world are going to be shaking their fists. You better stop right now. You better cut it out, or we're going to send these 3,000 or 4,000 troops that we have in Estonia. They got, I think they just recently said they had 11 troops. 11 to say 11, literally, not 1,100, not 11,000, 11.
Yeah.
And Russia's going to say, we ain't answering the phone. We talked to you. We gave you a less chance. And whatever you're going to do, you best do it.
Yeah.
And you know what will happen? They'll turn to Trump. Trump, when you sit now, there'll be lunatics screaming, no, I don't believe Trump will do it. I do not believe that Donald Trump will commit troops and things like that. And they're going to be sitting there at some point. And I think we're getting close to that point. I think the Russians have talked all they can talk. And I think they're sending all of the messages they can. Look, one last chance. Are you sure this is what you want? It's up to you. That's the way it sounds like to me. Are you sure you want to do this?
Well, the Beatles had that song, Money Can't Buy You Love. And also, money can't buy you a winning army right now. It didn't matter how much money the United States would want to pump into Ukraine. There's not the manpower. And the West, as Marco Rubio freely admitted the other day in testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we don't have air defense systems to send to Ukraine. We're having to scrounge them from European allies who, if they give them up, they don't have anything left. And we don't have anything in the production line to make up for what we're giving away. and you want to go fight Russia? Yeah, you better wake up. It is get the sniffing salt out, and get a dose of reality.
Yeah, I think we're heading for another one of these Kabul, Saigon moments where people are going to be dangling off the fuselage of a C-130, getting out of Kiev, and it is what it is. They made this choice. This is what they got to face.
Well, let me in this former Foreign Service officer who was dared to challenge me. She also said, well, you mean you're saying that the Ukrainians should just pull out of these oblasts where the Russians don't yet fully control them? I said, yeah, absolutely. You're just saying that Russia's going to take them? And I looked at her, I said, what are you going to do to stop it? Do you have an army? Do you have children that you want to put in the army to send over? What physically could we do to stop it? Nothing. And she finally went, well, yeah. She wasn't completely crazy.
Right.
She at least acknowledged, yeah, okay, we can say this is outrageous. Well, can you stop it? Is there anything that you can do from a military standpoint that you could say, oh, we're going to send our 500,000 man army? Right now, our total army strength is not even 500,000. The Russians are standing at 1.5 million. Yeah, we're gonna send them to stop the Russians. This delusional stuff it's got to stop at some point.
Yeah. The other thing here in that article, once again, it's at Sonar 21. You have some other interesting information about this CNN article. The Israelis are making preparations to strike Iranian nuclear facilities as the Trump administration. I got two things to say on that. I recall, unless what I read was incorrect, I read a while back that the Israelis attempted a strike on Iran a few months back, and it didn't work out very well. And a lot of their missiles were shot down. Their planes had to turn back because they were being painted by radar. They were going to get shot down. Right. Number one. Number two, they can't strike the U.S. without refueling and without help. I mean, strike Iran. They can't attack Iran without U.S. help. So right. I look at that, and I've even heard this, that is propaganda crap. Yeah. That article was put out to try to have an effect on the negotiations. But in my belief, the Israelis, can't strike Iran. They don't have the wherewithal to do it. They can't do it without the United States. And right now, the U.S. is looking at Iran saying, man, they can punch pretty hard. We probably don't want to do this. So a lot of people think we will. I don't believe we're going to attack Iran. I may be wrong. But Iran's not the problem. Israel is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I never underestimate or count out the ability of Donald Trump to make the wrong choice. Now, you're absolutely right about Israel's inability to launch to destroy. Their intent is to destroy Iran's nuclear program. Number one, I've worked on military exercises looking at that very scenario. I mean, I'll just simply say that Israel can't do it. And whatever attempt they make, they're going to suffer significant losses. But even more threatening to them will be the Iranian retaliation with missiles that, frankly, Israel cannot stop. And you are also absolutely correct that they can't really do it without U.S. logistical support, both from intelligence as well as from air refueling and those kinds of activities. So, this is more I would call it Israeli posturing, and all of this is coming at the very time that Israel's standing in the world. If it could get any lower and become any more of a pariah, I don't know if that's possible. But now more and more countries are lining up to say, this is what you're doing. The genocide you're conducting by starvation of the Palestinians is evil, and it's got to stop. England's talking that way. Spain is suspending assistance to Israel, and even in the United States, there are a growing number of people that are speaking out against it. Now, the problem we got in the United States is you saw last night in D.C. This guy professing to support the Palestinian cause shot these 2 Israeli diplomats outside. I had never heard of the Jewish Museum, but okay, I guess it's a new thing, and killed them. Look, the killing's got to stop, and particularly killing. This guy may think he's striking a real blow for the Palestinian people by killing 2 unarmed diplomats, and whatever their guilt and complicity is in the horrors underway in Israel, doesn't give you a right to murder them unarmed. But at the same time, Israel has continued to get away with the vast, unparalleled murders of Palestinians day after, and now the starvation. So, it's got to stop. And what I'm afraid of right now in the United States is we've got a mentality that anybody who speaks up on behalf of the Palestinian people is immediately labeled an anti-Semite, and that somehow you're in favor of killing Jews, which is it's sort of a neat debating trick to try to cast anybody that raises that criticism in that light. But it's just a testimony of where we are, and to the extent that the United States continues to embrace that, we're going to become more isolated in the world ourselves.
And additionally, and I'm with you. I'm opposed to that kind of violence. I believe, the other week I went to the Russian embassy for the May 9th celebration, and when I came out, there were some people standing there with these signs that said Putin equals Hitler. Hey, you know what? I would fight for their rights to express I don't agree with them, but that they should have the right to do that. And one of them walked up to me and said, what country may I ask what country you represent? And I just said, no, you may not, and kept walking. I didn't want to engage him. I respected his right. I didn't say nothing bad. I didn't really want to engage him, but I don't want to walk out of the embassy because I'm in the Russian embassy and he says, oh, he supports Russia. He'll shoot me. Somebody walks out of an embassy of some country and they don't like what the country's doing, and whatever country, oh, I don't like them, and start shooting them. That's a very bad place. I think, to me, diplomacy is so important. It almost has to be kind of like a sacred ground. Germany, Japan, they had embassies in countries that they were at war with during World War II. You have to have that, to me. Yeah. So that being said, here's the other thing. I predicted that stuff several months back. I said, you know what? The way this is going, there's people out here that are angry, violent, and unbalanced. There's people, because of that, could go shoot some innocent Jewish person in a synagogue, or fire people in a synagogue, or again, shoot this person. I'm not saying they're innocent or not. I'm saying at the time they'd have a gun in their hand and you could be angry at them. You know what? If they'd have walked out and somebody had protested them and held up signs and called them names, whatever they wanted, right? I'd say, hey, that's not nice, but you're exercising your First Amendment. You got a right to do that. But what was going on in Israel, it's like you could foresee everybody is not as gentle and balanced as maybe you and I are. And the potential is there for people to act out in violence. So realistically, Israel really, in my opinion, they put Jewish people in harm's way worldwide, innocent people, because of their actions. And I think that's something, it's like we're there to protect the Jews. You're putting Jewish people, some Jewish guy who could be in complete opposition to what Israel's doing. And, some crazy person just walk up and shoot this guy. Those are the kind of things that I've been afraid of that could happen for a long time.
Well, there's this video has been circulating this week of this one former member of the Knesset. I guess he was sort of like the Newt Gingrich in terms of being a leader of the Knesset, headed it up. Feiglin, I think, is his name. And in this video, he goes full Colonel Shivington. I think Shivington was the guy's name. Shivington was this U.S. Army colonel in like 1870 that was in charge of the Sand Creek Massacre of the Sioux Indians. And they killed children. And he said, nits make lice. He was justifying the murder of American Indian children. Well, here is this former, respected member of the Israeli legislature saying that they had to kill all the Gazan babies, kill them now. And it's like, we've come. Here is Israel that justifies it, one of its reasons to exist on the Holocaust, with embracing the stories that the Germans murdered hundreds of thousands, if not a million, children, and by gassing them and burning them alive, or burning them after they're dead. And now we've come full circle to having an Israeli espouse the same sort of hateful, vile, the same sort of despicable ideas as the Nazis that they claim to oppose. And, this is not just ironic, this is horrific, that, there was always an element of Judaism which stood for justice and for law. And that segment of Judaism is just being strangled in the crib by these zealots. And, the word zealotry comes into our language because of fanatical Jews like this guy. And we're fully justifying the murder of children. And, I've always hearkened back to the words of another Middle Eastern Jew, a guy by the name of Jesus, who commented that anybody who harmed children deserved to have a heavy stone tied around their neck and be tossed into the bottom of the sea. And in making that comment, he didn't say, this only applies to Jewish children. This only applies to Christian children. This only applies to Muslim children. No, it was children in general. And, Israel has a heavy price and karma to pay for what it is doing to these children.
And and that also goes, to be quite frank, for our government. You know what I mean? You got to look at our government. I look at our Congress, and these people are like just going along with it, being quiet. Nobody's saying either one of two things: either they're 100% in charge of it, or they are quiet as a church mouse. You know what I mean? They're saying nothing. They're ignoring it. They're going on and pretending like, not like other things have to be addressed and nothing's going on. The idea that, and when you think about it, you got this city, not a big one. You close off the entrances and the exits so the people in it can't leave. You won't let them leave. You won't let food or water come in, and you just bomb them and shoot them and day and night. You know what I mean? It's literally putting men, women, and children in a room, close the room off, and just start throwing bombs in the room.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put that. And then, we're after Hamas. You'd say that, but then every now and then, and it's pretty fairly often, they come and tell the truth. And they just say, well, everybody's got to die. All children are the enemy. Everybody's the enemy. Well, you don't have to say that. If you close everything off and say no food and water is not allowed in, and they're not allowed to leave, it would be terrible, but it wouldn't be as bad if you opened the doors and said, we're going to bomb the area and everybody's got to leave, and you got 3 weeks to leave. At the end of those 3 weeks, we're going to bomb the area. Well, that would be wrong. It's their area. No, you close the doors and say you can't leave, and we're going to bomb the area and just and make it unsurvivable, which at that point, it is clearly an intentional genocide. And the idea that our government says to people, your college speaks up against it. Your college is allowing people to exercise their First Amendment right. You got two things that are wrong there. Number one, you got a genocide, so they should be speaking. But number two, you have no respect for the First Amendment. These are people that when they got elected, they said, yeah, we're tired of all of this COVID and all of this other censorship. We can't have that. You got people that we believe in the Constitution. We're constitutionalists. We're patriots. America first. And then as soon as you get elected, what about the Constitution? Well, when it comes to Israel, we get constitutions. Yeah. I'll say this, Larry. I judge your belief in the Constitution one way. There's only one way to judge it. How do you react when people say things you don't like? Because the First Amendment specifically protects unpopular speech, not popular speech.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I wish Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president, who was put on a bit, given a bit of a show trial by Donald Trump. It was a complete political stunt yesterday, where they put together this propagandistic video to suggest that the government of South Africa is promoting a new form of white apartheid, and which is not true. Is there targeting of white farmers in South Africa? Yes, that's gone on. Is there violence against some white farmers? Yes. Have some been killed? Yes. But there's also enormous violence against the black population as well. So, but the broader point is South Africa is not by virtue of policy singling out that we're going to attack and destroy all the Caucasians in South Africa. Have not said such a thing, have advocated against that. They're on the record. And so here's Donald Trump accusing Ramaphosa of endorsing and supporting genocide. And I just wish at that point that Ramaphosa would have said, Mr. President, you've shown a video of this one South African who said the most outrageous, extremist things about attacking and killing white farmers. And I strongly disagree with that. But in South Africa, we do have freedom of speech. And I would just remind you that in 1977, your own U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a neo-Nazi group had the right and freedom to march in Skokie, Illinois, in an area that was filled with Holocaust survivors. But because the First Amendment allowed speech, even if it is unwelcome. But I wish Ramaphosa would have also said, but Mr. President, it's libelous and obscene for you to accuse me of genocide when you have sat in this office and welcomed and embraced Bibi Netanyahu, who by his own words and the deeds of his own soldiers have dedicated themselves to destroying and eliminating Palestinians. They've killed tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians, including almost 20,000 children. And you've embraced him. You've said nothing about their genocide. You've said not a word about it. So instead of me sitting here and having you insult me and insult the people of South Africa, we're going to leave now because you don't get to treat us that way. And you don't get to indulge in this sort of racist attack upon us. Have a good day.
Yeah.
He was too polite. He was too polite.
Yeah, it's like, here's what this guy said. Is that party in power? He's an opposition party that's not even in power. So you want to, that would be like him saying, hey, look, you know what? Donald Trump, here's a tape of what Jill Stein said. She's the Green Party. And I'm going to say you are responsible. Your party, the whole United States is responsible for what somebody in the Green Party said. That party's not in power. The guy did whatever he said or whatever he didn't say. He's not in power. He's not making policy. Donald Trump's not making policy. So to take some random whatever party it was and say, I don't like what this guy said, well, I might not like it either. Yeah. I'm the president of the country. Yeah. But he's allowed to say that. I don't agree. The issue is not what he said, is what are our policies? And it's just, you sit there and you just look at this and you see these contradictions. Another contradiction, I got to bring it up. Donald Trump will say, oh, these soldiers in Ukraine and the Russian soldiers and these beautiful young men are dying. I agree with you. But the Palestinians are dead. Men, women, and children are being slaughtered. And it makes you look like, I don't know what, but it makes it there's this absurd contradiction for you to take this moral position that you have to save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers and Russian soldiers. I agree. But how can you take a moral position and just turn your head and they say, what are you going to do about people being starved? Oh, I'm working on that. Well, they don't have that kind of time.
Yeah. No, it is the level of hypocrisy is shocking. And now it's not just Trump. I mean,
exactly.
Biden did it. Obama did it. George W. Bush did it. Bill Clinton. So let's just. Trump is following in a rich tradition of his predecessors, but it's still galling every time that you see it. And what's so frustrating about it is Trump could actually be better. If it'd be one thing to say, look, you know, again, how he should have handled the president of South Africa in private, out of the public spotlight, not where he's not trying to embarrass him. Say, look, this is happening in your country, and I grant you that it's, you may not have control over all of this, but we'd sure like to work with you in making sure that that stops. And in the same voice, we're going to make sure that humanitarian aid starts getting into Palestine, into Gaza. But it's just it's a selective morality, selective outrage. That is there's justifiable anger at the murder of these two Israeli diplomats last night in Washington. But what about the more than 100 Palestinian children and women and civilians, men that were killed yesterday? Not a word, not a tear. So it's just, like I said, the selective moral outrage I get tired of. I'd like us to have one standard and adhere to it. And just that our standard is this. We believe that it's wrong to kill civilians, period.
Exactly. How about we observe international law?
Yeah.
With all of this stuff, we observe international law, but no, that we got to make it. We got the rules-based order. The rules-based order, for all of the talk that is gone, it's still there. They're still trying to say we'll, apply standards that we deem necessary when we deem them necessary. Now, the other thing that you did, we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to touch this. You got an interesting article, and it's down that line too, and that is, Germany, major criminals should keep quiet. Rather than accusing Russia of aggression, Germany's leadership and media should ask forgiveness and remain silent for centuries. Analysis of the greatest genocide of all times. You make a good point here. And it's, again, we get back to Germany. Oh, Putin's a war criminal. Oh, the Russians are killing Ukrainians. What Germany did, they literally went into Russia with the intent of starving, killing, massacring civilians. Yeah. Leningrad, for God's sake, the Russians lost 900,000 civilians. They lost more people in Leningrad, 4 or 5 times more than the U.S. lost in the entire World War II. So your thoughts and your discussion of this Germany major criminals should keep quiet article.
I'd like to take credit for writing that article. It was actually written by a friend of mine, Peter Hansler, who is a Swiss citizen but lives in Moscow. But the attacks on the civilians, I was just watching a documentary on the Battle of Stalingrad last night. An estimated 850,000 Russian soldiers died in that battle, and over 1 million civilians were killed and killed by the Germans. So that goes to the heart of what you do when you look at this. That's why civilians were overwhelmingly targeted by the Nazis, because part of what was driving them was this ideological belief that the Slavic people were intellectually, biologically inferior to the West, to the Aryan race, and they needed to be exterminated. So kill them all. And it's that same kind of mentality we're seeing with respect to Israel today, vis-a-vis the Palestinians and the Arabs.
Yeah, exactly. And let me add this. Look, I have to say, in my opinion, based on what I've seen from the Ukrainians, rhetoric-wise, they got people in Ukraine. I've read statements where they've made genocidal statements about the Russians. We saw what happened, and then putting a bunch of Russians, they've killed Russians. They outlaw their religion. They outlaw everything about their culture. I believe this. If they had the opportunity, the damn Banderites would do the exact same thing to the Russians in Eastern Europe as the Zionists are doing to the Palestinians.
Yeah, well, and it's so curious that so many in the West, particularly the Western media, ignore the overt signs that are appended on groups like the Azov Battalion, Right Sector, where they fully embrace the Mein Kampf of Adolf Hitler. They fully embrace the symbology that was associated with the Third Reich, particularly with respect to groups like the Schutzstaffel, the SS. And, it's that old, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, probably a duck. And when they're walking, talking, looking like Nazis, maybe we ought to just take them at their word and said, yeah, these guys really are embracing an ideology that was at the heart of a major war that ended up killing 27 million people in the Soviet Union, and several 2 or 3 million throughout Europe and North Africa. So it's just it is what it is, and our refusal to attack it head on is part of the problem.
This is how bad it is, and this to me shows they know what the hell they're doing. When the Russian entered the Ukraine conflict, I put this up on my Facebook page, right? I couldn't post. I couldn't for like 60 days, 30 or 60 days. I couldn't go live for 90 days. I couldn't, like the most massive restrictions. Now, because I put this NBC News article up. Now, it was still up on NBC News.
Yeah.
It was still there. I put it up. There's the article with the pictures. Oh, you can't do this. And if you read it, Germans were confronted with image of their country's dark past on Monday night when German public TV broadcaster ZDF showed video of Ukrainians soldiers with Nazi symbols on their helmets in its evening newscast. In a report on the fragile ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, Moscow correspondent Bernard Licht used pictures of a soldier wearing a combat helmet with SS runes and Hitler's infamous black uniform elite corps. A second soldier was seen with a swastika on his gear. Volunteer battalions from nearly every political spectrum are reinforcing the side. Now, here's the thing. So Germans can't say, oh, we had no idea.
Yeah.
We didn't know what? Nazis? We would have never thought of such a thing. It's broadcast on TV. It's all over the place. You can't say you don't know. And then the same people support these say, yes, the AfD, we must stop them. They're an evil party. Why? Oh, because they're Nazis. Really? So that's the problem. You got a problem with them that you're calling them Nazis, and they're literally saying, yeah, we don't want to keep sending money over here to these people. We want to keep it for ourselves. I'm not saying I'm pro or anti-AfD. The AfD is Eurosceptic, and they don't want to continue with the Ukraine war, and they do want good relations with Russians for whatever reason. But yet the people who are absolutely allied with Nazis are like, we got to stop them because they're Nazis. Again, the contradictions are beyond belief.
Well, if Lewis Carroll was still alive and writing books like Alice in Wonderland, he'd have to up his opium level of consumption in order to enter the world of the hallucinations that dominate. Because here on the one hand, you get genuine neo-Nazis who espouse neo-Nazi ideology, and at the heart of it is white supremacy over Jews, which you could make a case is, you know what, that's genuine anti-Semitism. But they are embraced by Jewish members of the U.S. Congress and by Christian Zionists in the United States as wonderful people. And then those people who are actually Jewish, who speak out against the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, are labeled as anti-Semitic and attacked for being anti-Jewish for the simple fact of speaking up. And I mean, it is, the contradictions are mind-numbing. Your jaw hangs open going, we can be this contradictory, this stupid, this ignorant, and everybody, the vast majority, news media included, go along with it.
Yeah. Well, the great thing, Larry, is that you're doing the good work on Sonar 21 and online, that we're all on alternative media. And even though, as I said, if you want to look, I'll put up one last thing here. Okay. NATO says it didn't notice Ukraine soldiers' apparent Nazi symbol in a tweet. They didn't notice it in the tweet. They didn't notice it on his uniform. They didn't notice it on his tank. They didn't notice it in the documents. They didn't notice it on the Azov Battalion patch. They didn't notice it on a tweet. So, and think about it. They didn't notice it, but everybody else did.
Well, that was their Hogan hero moment, Sergeant Schultz.
Yeah.
I see nothing. I hear nothing.
That was it. Exactly. It's a joke.
Oh.
And it becomes down to, these people have discredited themselves so, profoundly. All right. Don't forget, everybody. Here's the important thing before we go. Sonar21.com. That's Larry's fantastic website. You'll find his work on there. You'll find his great articles on there, the stuff that we talk about and more. So if you really want to keep up with what's happening, you want to keep up with what's going on out there and be informed on alternative media, guess what? Go to sonar21.com. Larry, where can people find you online to follow you on social media or whatever?
Yeah, well, go to Sonar 21, and I've got the links to not just to Patreon, but to Countercurrents, a station where I usually do a broadcast once a week.
Okay.
Did an interview with Doug McGregor that's currently up.
Oh, wonderful.
And I actually explore a lot about his time working for Donald Trump. Got some real insights. You begin to understand how much Trump is actually not clued into what's going on. The deep state is running circles around him. But Sonar 21, that's the springboard.
I'm glad you said that. I'm going to definitely watch that because that's something I definitely want to hear. So an up close and personal discussion from somebody who worked for Donald Trump. That's something that everybody needs to see. That's Countercurrents, which is, by the way, that's Larry's YouTube page. So thanks a lot, Larry. Everybody, here's the important things to remember. Go to sonar21.com to get your information. Share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Substack. Follow me on Rockfin. And guess what? Now, if you look, everything scrolling across, I have a P.O. box. So if you want to send me a snail mail letter or anything via snail mail, even that's there. Thanks a lot. We're out.